Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's some subject of exploring angels and demons. Okay, so the next 3 weeks, we're going to unpack this. Pastor Ravina's already a little bit nervous, okay, about this. We had this, honestly, it's been on our heart for a while to look at the subject, but just generally in society, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of talk about spiritual things crossing across angels and demons. As pastors, we have people who come to us with different views on things, different expressions, and different understandings. So we thought, let's try and unpack this a little bit more. We're not going to be able to unpack everything in the next 3 weeks about angels and demons, okay? Just in case you think we're going to. And I guarantee at the end of this, you're going to be like, you forgot to talk about that. You forgot to talk about that. There's going to be a little bit, we have to agree to disagree in some bits that a lot of this stuff, we're trying to piece together a lot of what the Bible is saying. And some of this stuff is not as obvious as we think it's obvious. And actually, we're going to pull it together. We're going to talk about later on, we're going to talk about angels and wings. And I'll tell you about my disagreement with ChatGPT for those of you who are into your AI technology. So I just want you, just for a moment, just with those around you, if you are able to just look at these 3 questions for a moment. And I wonder what your answers will be for each of these questions. When were angels created? What is the job of angels? And who created demons? Okay? Do you want to have a moment just around your tables, the people next to you? I'm sure they're not going to be demons. Okay, we look around there. But if you want to try and flick up and sort of try and go, if you want to try and grab some eyes around you, just look at these questions. I'm leaving them on the screen, don't worry. When were angels created? What is the job of angels? And who created demons? And if you don't know, it's okay. That's why you've come along the next few days. Okay. Right. So looking at question 1 here. Does anyone want to give examples? When were angels created? Before man has been mentioned, okay? One at a time. Okay, forgive my really bad handwriting. So before man, someone else said, what's the other one? Val, what did your table say? Okay, before man, beginning of time. Okay. Anyone else want to suggest when they were? Before, you're going to come next one there, Bill. You're jumping ahead. It's good. So, okay. So you got before man, beginning of time. Is anyone who thinks it was before the creation story in the Bible? Put your hands up. Who thinks it is in the middle of the creation story? Put your hands up. Yeah. Next week, some people might get a gold star. Okay. We'll have to look later on. It's really fascinating. It's got me thinking this about when were they created? Because this has an impact on demonic as well. Okay, and Satan. So that's why we're introducing angels first, because it does link in to next week when we get into looking more at the demonic side of things. Okay, so we've got different answers there. What is the job of angels? Do you want to put your hands up? Because we'll do it old-fashioned way. Rob. Messenger, okay. What's the other ones you got, Bill? Protectors. Okay, you got worshippers. Okay, what else are you going to put down? Someone's been reading Hebrews 1, or ministering spirits. That's good. Okay, anything else? Sasha? Okay, to help, okay, so we'll put that in ministering spirits to do God's work, to do some ministering. Okay. Pardon? Guardians. Ooh. We had a debate about this in our office yesterday. That's why I'm saying that. Okay, it's good. Anything else? Fighters, there we go. We're protectors. We'll put protectors, fighters, okay? They don't sound like those little chubby Michelangelo pictures, do they? Okay, they will be speaking about this. And finally, the question I want to ask you, who created demons? We've got interesting there. Someone said, okay, so God has been shouted out. Any other options, Bill? Lucifer? Interesting. We got a few weeks to explore this. Don't worry. So we got a couple of weeks. Jane, we'll explore that a bit more next week. So that's good. That's good. Okay. It's interesting because Alex can throw you loads of verses back as well, just to confuse you all. Okay, Phil. Interesting. We'll have to find out next week, Phil. Okay, don't give anything away too much. It's really, I really mean this. With some of this stuff, actually, we'll vouch for it because we had a bit of a conversation when we pulled this together. A lot of it is not as straightforward as we always think it is. And this subject is actually so much more complex than we could ever imagine. Today's the easy bit to doing for looking at it today. But it's these questions are kind of very important. Because yesterday, the idea of angels being spoken about and demons, there was a revival last year. I think it was last year, the year before. Anyone heard of the Asbury revival? It was a big movement at a university in America where people traveled for miles. A sense of God, a prayer meeting started. And I think I can't remember how many days it went on for. But it was a real move amongst the younger generation. And the one thing they spoke about was the amount of people who interacted with the demonic, who were being cast out and who were demonized, and they were being prayed for. This was in the US. This isn't sort of anywhere else in the world. But also, so they got these stories going on, and we're having more and more people now ask us questions about the demonic. Some people, it is mental health issues. Okay, so some people think mental health and they think they've got demonic, but there is also more and more cases of people with demons. My first encounter ever with demons was a Muslim guy whose brother had become a Christian. He was a bit of a radical Muslim. And I got a phone call from this Church of England vicar saying, listen, Jim, I can't get hold of our exorcist. He's on holiday. Do you mind going around and praying for him? And I was a bit young and naive. Okay, I went upstairs to this place, and they didn't even tell him I'm a Christian. And they just sort of they sort of said he's like a doctor. So I'm going in there. I had my phone ringing my wife. I said, if I don't call you in 10 minutes, okay, every 10 minutes, please call the police to this house, sort of story. And I went and prayed for him, and we prayed in the name of Isa, which is with the way in the Middle East, they're called Jesus. I prayed in the name of Jesus and started vomiting. Different things happened, and you could see stuff came off him. And some demonic was coming off him. And I went back 2 days later. It's my favorite story in ministry, because I went and sat with him 2 days later, and he goes, oh, thank you. Allah sent you to me. I said, all right. I said, I prayed in the name of Jesus for you. I then told him I'm a minister. He went, yeah, Allah removed the spirit so that I could make you a good Muslim. Did you see here? A few weeks later, he ended up going to a church. But that was my first real encounter of praying. But angelic encounters, they're happening more and more. And I'm even listening to a history podcast, and the Angels and Moors, a First World War story. They're unpacking what it means. I'm hearing stories about so many soldiers who fought in the First and Second Gulf War who have had encounters, angels appearing and stories happening. And this has been spoken about in mainstream media and mainstream podcasts. This is not just the weird and wonderful and wacky. This is mainstream guys talking about angels. But the problem is, with all the spiritual world, we're getting very confused. Because the amount of people who would say to me, if I asked you who's in charge of hell, what would you say? Some people say Lucifer. No, it's not Lucifer. That's going for Greek mythology. Hell is prepared to destroy Satan. Satan is not in charge. And it's really interesting because a lot of these ideas which we have, and we'll talk about angels and spiritual world, aren't as accurate as we think they are. A lot of it is Greek myths that have come into our popular culture. And a lot of it is also, I always joke about The Simpsons, but when I watch them, don't judge me for watching The Simpsons. My wife already judges me for watching them with my kids. But I sit and tell my children, this is not the truth. That is not what the Bible says. That is not how it is. That is not how this is. And we sort of spend time talking to them. So, why is it important to look at this subject? The first thing, reason important to look at this subject is this. It's because we need to be aware of an unseen spiritual world. You know, Ephesians 6 verses 1 to 12 says this, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and against the authorities, against dark powers, powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in heavenly realms. You know, there is a spiritual battle going on in the world right now. It's very obvious if you go somewhere like India, when you've got the big idols everywhere and you can see stuff and it's a lot more evident. Or when I grew up in Africa, it was a lot more evident. The British tourists, the TV shows, they go and see the medicine man. My dad used to threaten to shoot the medicine man if he came on the farm because he knew the damage and the power that these men can hold in the demonic. And this stuff is going on. And we can see it around the place, certain parts of the city. You can see almost like a darkness that is holding on. And in England, it doesn't always feel obvious, but it's definitely happening here. And it's definitely a lot more going on spiritually in this country than we ever realize. You know, imagine if you could see the world through different animals' eyes. So I don't know if you know about dogs, but dogs only apparently see in blues and yellows. A bright red ball on green grass looks like 2 shades of brown to a dog. And the way the dog sees the world is so different from the way we see the world. So as far as the dog's concerned, he doesn't see all the colors. They don't see all the colors that we do. They don't see it as clearly. Then you have bees, and bees see an ultraviolet light. So flowers have patterns glowing with UV markers that we can't see, but that bees can see with their eyes to land. Isn't that incredible? This is all going on in our world, but you don't actually see it. And I've got a picture coming up in a minute. Here we go. And then we have the mantis shrimp, and apparently they have 12 plus color sensors. We've got 3, including one for polarized light and for UV light. They see hidden colors and light patterns that are completely invisible. Then we've got birds. Birds apparently have ultraviolet markings on them that we can't see. And so a plain brown bird to us could be a brightly colored bird to the other birds who can see in a different shade. And this is sort of a picture of the way we see here. Imagine this is a flower here. And then you've got the human view of what's going on there with the flower. You've got a bee's view of the flower. It's all different shapes. You've got the mantis shrimp's view of a flower. And then this is just a bit of cheesiness when making this picture. You've got a spiritual view. It's all very different. And the world isn't quite how it appears at first glance for us. We're just looking in the physical, but we need to be aware that the spiritual is happening as well. That there are angels and there are demons around. And I'm not one of those, just when we start now, who thinks there's a demon hiding around every single corner ready to get me. Okay, there might be, but I'm not one of those at the moment who goes around doing that. But I think it's really it's something that we should be aware of as Christians, but it's not something that needs to overwhelm our mind, that we need to be completely preoccupied with. Hebrews, but it's something we should be aware of. Hebrews 13 verse 2 is one of a verse I love. It says, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. And I love that verse. And I won't share it now. I spoke about this before Christmas, about angels last year. And I spoke about what happened in Serbia when we keep having these people randomly appear in front of us to help us. Michelle will vouch for me and Roy. And it was incredible. And we're wondering, I'm sitting there for a moment when I was preparing this last year, some stuff on angels, thinking, I wonder how many angel encounters I've had without even realizing it. I know when I grew up, my mother had an incredible angel encounter, and I may have told you this story before, so if I have, please apologize. But she had this moment when she went into the toughest part of Johannesburg in South Africa. And Johannesburg there, they'll literally chop your finger off to get your ring or your wrist off. They'll attack you. It was the most violent place behind Bogota in the world at that stage. Her and her friend got caught down an alleyway with someone walking towards them, looking at their jewelry. And they thought, okay, this is it. Out of nowhere, a woman appeared. And my mum remembered looking at her watch at that moment. I think it was 11 o'clock, because she was so scared about what was going to happen. This woman appears, shouts at these young men and tells them, this woman's come to give you hope in life. Listen to what they say and get along to that meeting tonight. My friend, what's going on? This is bizarre. Then the woman just vanished. It's the only way they could describe it. They didn't know where she went. They went back to the main base that afternoon, and someone came up and said, did you see an angel at 11 o'clock? And they said, what do you mean? They said, we were praying back at the base, and 11 o'clock, we all suddenly felt we had to stop, and we saw you surrounded by angels and an angel appearing to you. So we still stopped and prayed for you during that period. Crazy. And it was like, oh my goodness. And so there's experiences of it, of understanding it. It's actually really, we need to have a bit of a grasp, because we don't know when we've got these impacts around us. And that was a real protection moment. So I love Daniel chapter 10, verses 12 to 14. And Daniel writes quite a lot about angels. He says this, then he continued, do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I've come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I've come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come. And this is something that we could miss quite easily whilst you read your Bible through in a year. But here we have this picture of the angel appearing to Daniel here in the middle of his fourth and final vision. And Daniel's been on a 3-week fast, and he has this vision of God revealing the future. And this man of white, who is the debate whether it's an angel or Jesus, okay, we won't have that debate tonight. But he comes and he seems to suggest that the reason the vision was delayed was because it was hindered by a spiritual battle that was going on. And this message was delayed coming to him because of this fight that was going on in the heavenlies. And it gives us a little window into this other realm that's going on. It's a bit like, when you peep through the gap in the fence. Remember my daughter, when we had a little gap in the fence to our neighbor, she looked through and was watching everything the neighbors were doing. I'm so glad they weren't doing anything inappropriate. Okay. But the problem with that little bit is she gets a little glimpse of the garden, but she doesn't see everything. And there's lots of little glimpses like this passage gives us a little window to the other realm that's going on, but it doesn't give us the complete full picture. We're piecing things together from the little angles that we're given. And sometimes it's a little bit crazy, but if you read the whole Bible's a little bit crazy, but God's amazing. Okay, on the surface of it all, we'll unpack this a bit more in a minute. My wife always tells me I can't call the Bible crazy. I mean that in the nicest way possible. Okay, it is when we look at what we believe, this stuff is going on. We need to get our heads around it. So Jesus referred to angels. And when he was annoyed with Peter chopping off the ear of the assistant, when Jesus gets arrested and Peter goes and chops off the chief's assistant's ear, it's really interesting, the line that Jesus says next. He says this, do you think I cannot call on my Father, and at once he will put at disposal of more than 12 legions of angels? They say they're going to come and sort me out, help me out. The implication of Jesus here is that at his command, there will be legions, thousands of angels coming to protect him. What does that say to you? There is a battle going on. Even Jesus is referring to this battle that we don't fully know, we don't fully understand. When we put this with the picture of Daniel, we can see that there's a spiritual battle going on, and there's powers going on in certain areas that is causing great harm. If you skip forward, it talks about Michael. We're going to explore Michael in a minute. But Romans chapter 12, verse 7 to 9, it says this. Then a war broke out in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. We'll explore this a bit more next week. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to earth with his angels around him. And you can see the battle again going on here between the heavenly angels and the demonic forces. Are we starting to see this a little bit now? We're going to unpack it a bit more in a moment. So it goes even. Genesis chapter 3, I haven't put it on there, but in Genesis chapter 3, we have this picture of a snake coming in and tempting Eve. And if you know the Middle Eastern culture, a snake is a sign of chaos and disorder. It's the way the culture speaks, the way they speak about chaos disorder. They talk about snakes. When I was in India a few weeks ago, Pastor Veem was terrified of snakes. He was kept going about snakes, watch your shoes. For snakes, check your snakes. Delu's dad was like, he tapped my shoes first to make sure there's no snakes in them. Because snakes are dangerous. And this idea of this snake coming in and causing problems. We'll have this picture again. And now Satan was portrayed as a snake here who led humans away from God, which links into this passage, Revelation. And about Satan leading the world astray, there is so much written in the Bible about the spiritual battles that is going on even more. You know, Paul writes about us, he says this in 1 Corinthians 8 verse 5, he says, indeed, even though there are so-called gods in heaven and on earth, there are, to be sure, many gods and many lords. And it's really interesting because I don't know about you, but whenever I read the word gods in the Bible, how many of you think of an idol? Put your hands up if you think of an idol when you read them. How many of you think of demonic forces? It's really interesting. How many times does the word demon appear in the Old Testament? If you think it is more than 100, put your hands up. If you think it is more than 10, put your hands up. Go and be brave. If you think it doesn't appear, put your hands up. The word demon doesn't appear in the Old Testament. Really interesting. Did anyone actually know that beforehand? You can now put your hands up and know. Sandra, you're taking next week's session. It's really interesting because Paul speaks here about the so-called gods in the heaven and the earth. Now, if you look at the Old Testament, there is loads of references. I know it's quite small there. Exodus 12, verse 12. It says, and all the gods of Egypt I will execute, and all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. How's God going to execute judgment on just a random stone? He's not going to, or like a fake God. Deuteronomy 32, verse 17. There we go. This is a bad translation because it says demons here. They sacrificed to demons that were not God, to gods they had never known, to new gods that had come recently. Psalm 82, verses 1. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Psalm 82, verse 6. I said, you gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. Psalm 86, verse 8. There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any like you, nor are there any works like yours. Psalm 95, verse 3. For the Lord is a great God and a king above the gods. Now, I just want to unpack this for a moment because there's a lot of implications in the Old Testament about a lot of gods with a little g, okay? Not our God with a big G. Does that make sense? The little g gods. And if we look through the Old Testament, the way that it's phrased, and there's so many verses, this is just a handful that I pulled out today. There's some suggestions about a lot of theologians and Bible teachers that these little gods were like the prince of the Persian kingdoms. They were demonic beings active in certain areas. Now, Pastor Reen, when we were talking about this and preparing, he said about India. There's certain areas where there seems to be some like demonic forces and actions, sort of certain gods that are more worshipped than other gods. And we can see it around the world, sort of things happening. We can see it in areas where there seems to be cluster of certain attacks that are happening all the same. If you look at the news, and with this could be a link here that there's a spiritual battle going on, referring to some of these little gods that are demonic beings that are doing things behind the scenes that we don't actually spot and we don't know about. And as Christians, we walk around quite naively. This doesn't mean you have to go home, okay, and just look around your garden and say, is there a demonic being in my garden? Is that why my dog's being naughty? There might be, okay, but it might just be because your dog's naughty. Yeah, I shouldn't have put that one in, so I've skipped over really quickly. But if you look through, the little comments here, there's loads of small gods here that are coming through, and it shows us that there's a lot of stuff going on around us that we're not fully aware of. And there's a lot of demonic things that are happening around, I believe in the UK, I believe around the world, that we're not always aware of because we walk around in our physical world. And we live in a world that tells us if we believe in demons, then we're a bit crazy. I was speaking to someone the other day who was just searching about faith, and they sort of said to me, well, if you start telling me about demons, I'm going to think you're crazy, okay? And I'm not going to sure if I want to follow you. I want to follow me, but follow the teachings of Jesus. And I was like, well, the Bible does talk about demons, okay? We can't hide away from this. But there's one of my favorite guys in the world is a guy called John Lennox. Has anyone heard of John Lennox? If you haven't, you need to search him up. I was so excited last couple of weeks ago because I went on a tour of looking for high schools for my younger daughter. She knows what school she's going to, but she wants to go through the process with her sister. And they went to the Spanish department and they put down famous British people who can speak Spanish. And there was a picture of John Lennox. And I was so excited because no one knows who John Lennox is apart from me because I'm a bit geeky for Bible stuff. And they went, do you know that he is Annie Lennox's brother? I was like, really? That's not true. It is not true. He is Irish. She's not. And they didn't know who he was, but they put his picture on. So when I speak to the Spanish department next week on Parents' Evening, I'm going to raise, do you know you had one of the cleverest blokes in the country and you didn't even know who he was? But he's an incredible guy. And he says he's got a PhD in physics. He's got a PhD in maths. He's a professor at Cambridge University in some other crazy subjects. And he's got a PhD in theology. And Richard Dawkins will not debate him, okay, because he is so good. And he says this, the skeptic will hoot with derision if we add to our confession of faith in God the belief that another realm exists where there are supernatural beings, angels and demons. Such laughter strikes me as decidedly out of place, especially nowadays. If any scientist announces with confidence that there is life elsewhere in the universe, or that it is very likely these days that there's a multiverse, a plurality of universes, many of which are teeming with life, there is no derision, but rather a fascinated, respectful attention. Yet when the Bible suggests that there may not be only one world or universe, or there are other beings out there, it gets laughed to scorn. This is intellectually inconsistent and simply shows the depth of prejudice the naturalistic worldview has generated. Isn't that a good quote? I really wish I'd found out. So Stephen Hawking says we live in multiple universes and there's 5 of us living in different universes around the place and they're all crisscrossing. Everyone goes, wow, that's fascinating. You speak about angels and demons, they go, you're a bit of a wacko, aren't you? And it's amazing how it goes. But the reality is, there is a spiritual world out there which we need to be aware of as Christians. Because our battle is not against flesh and blood. Okay, it is against the spiritual things. And I have one of those things that I believe I've got a high sensitivity to when the spiritual atmosphere is going off. And I remember I've been walked out of shops before because I said to my wife, something's not right here. This is terrible. Pastor Edwin used to go to houses to pray for. he'd often take me with him. He goes, what do you think, Jim? Because I know you a little bit don't like this stuff. To get a sensing. And I go around Hanley, and it's amazing when you walk around the shops and you see the various witchcraft stuff that's being sold. It's crazy. The amount of people who actually, funny enough, come into churches and they've got things around their necks that I'm looking going, that's bad. But my family member gave it to me. And they almost feel they hold on to things. But with something that we should be scared of. In our area, I don't go on Facebook much anymore, but at one stage, one of the clairvoyants in the area lived in Packmore. And the local Patmore group used to put down a clairvoyant night, it's a spiritualist night that's going on. And he used to go around all the pubs. And there was always a couple of people who made a joke about it. But the comments on there were people being very serious about actually going to speak to a spiritualist to find out more and go for it. When I was working at Margaret Ward, doing a bit of work there, doing exam vigilation, etc., in one of the local schools, I remember sitting at lunchtime and I said, I believe in healing. And they turned around and said, oh, we believe in healing too. I thought, oh, this is great. And then they started telling me about Reiki and about other stuff that's going on. And guys, we've got to realize this is all happening in our area, okay? Huge stuff that's going on, but we're not always aware of it. And we need to grasp it. I run past a former spiritualist church nearly every day. According to Strava, I'm the person who runs the most down that way. And it's huge, the building that's there, and it's just derelict at the moment. And even my favorite podcast recently talked about this. And this is something that's people are starting to engage with in the world around us. And as Christians, it can give us an opportunity to share our faith with them and to talk about what we believe. But we need to know what we believe. Is that okay? So I've set the scene here for a little bit about this is a real thing that's going on. But we need to understand angels and demons because we need to make sure we listen to God and not angels and demons. As I've just shared now, we live in a world of Ouija boards, of psychic readings, of tarot cards, of palm readings, just to name a few things. People lap this up, and it's worth a lot of money. If you type in any of these things into Google, you'll be amazed at what gets offered to you around the corner. And people are opening themselves up to spiritual voices that are not of God. Now, in the second half, in the moment, I'm going to stop unpacking just more about angels. But we need to be aware that demons, who many people believe are fallen angels, we'll explore that next week, are there to deceive us. 1 Timothy 4 verse 1 says this, the Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith and follow, what does it say? Deceiving spirits and things that are taught by demons. So I meet up with some pastors, and there's one pastor who will say to me straight out, when churches are compromising on the Bible, he will say, that is a lie from the pit of hell. That is demonic. And he's straight away calling it demonic. I'm there going a bit more cautious. That's a little bit misled. He goes, no, it's not, it's demonic. And when you look at this, anything that takes people away from the truth of Jesus Christ is demonic. So therefore, we need to be aware that there are demonic things that are going on, that there are teachings that are going on that would happen. So example I will use is this. So if you're Catholic tonight, please close your ears. Okay, there's a lot of good Bible-believing Catholics, but there are also a lot of people in the Catholic Church who are deceived. And there was an area where some people who like to worship a female deity. We've got Diana, you've got Aphrodite. All throughout the history, there's been female goddesses that have been worshipped. Some people in certain areas, they couldn't get over that worshipping of the female deity when the Christian message came in. So they felt they had to worship something. So what did they do? They worship Mary. And Mary's statues become everything. Where does that lie come from? That comes from the demonic. It's a demonic being they were worshiping before in the death. And then that just gets transferred across to worshiping Mary which is placed in some churches. So we need to be very conscious of this stuff that's going on. And we can see it even with the earth. Like, I believe we need to look after the earth. I believe the earth is great, but you're never going to find me hugging a tree. Okay. And the problem is, people, again, you've gone from looking after the earth, and I'm all big on that, to actually the earth is Mother Earth. When the earth is this, the earth is that. And the teachings come. Where does that come from? That comes from demonic teaching. And I could say stuff online, but if some religions see me, I might get attacked, so I won't. Okay, just right now. But we can see this throughout history of the fact that actually demons will twist things and will change truth to put people into bad situations. And we need to be conscious of this, especially in the world of YouTube. Anyone can tell you anything. Okay, and we need to be very conscious of this. And if we're aware of a spiritual battle that's going on, we are then more aware of the stuff that we're listening to. Because is this, when someone gives you a prophetic word, is this of God or is this a demonic word? So if someone gives you a prophetic word that tells you you're going to marry that person over there, but that person over there is married to someone else. Okay, that's not a God. But the amount of words that can be given, the amount of words that are misled, the amount of stuff that's happened, we've seen across the church over the centuries, you can see that deceiving spirits have been involved to take people away from the truth and the message of God. And if you look at Acts chapter 16, I encourage you, I don't think I've got it on there, so we'll come in later on. It's very, you see, how Paul casts out demon from a lady who was fortune-telling. And there's a thin line between fortune-telling and prophetic words. It's going to sound a bit strange here. I showed Pastor Ravine a while ago. I was watching, before I went to India, I thought I was going to be really sensible, and I watched a couple of shows on India, people traveling around India, just to thought I'd prepare myself. And they spoke about fortune-tellers in India. And there's one clip I showed him, it was on Amazon Prime. And I think you were there as well, Michelle, weren't you? And it was scary because they had a fortune teller in the street in Delhi, and he started giving out fortunes. And I showed the guys Timus. I said, this is scaring me because at times I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between if that had been in church, if that had been a person in church giving a prophetic word, or a demonic person out on the street. Because the words sounded very similar. And we need to be aware of the spiritual battle as Pentecostals, because there are going to be people and there is going to be demonic stuff that's going to come in and give words that are inaccurate. So, right, can we pause for 1 minute? Is that all right? Give yourself head a bit of a wobble for a minute, okay? So, just briefly on the table, on your tables, just to this. I'll maybe just talk about some of the stuff he's spoken about already. Then I'm going to hit through angels in half an hour. So the question I just want you to think about now is, have you seen spiritual battles at play in this area, or are you a little bit skeptical still? Is that okay? So just have a chat amongst you, because some of you may have seen stuff, you may not have. Have you seen spiritual battles going on? Or is it something that maybe you're a little bit skeptical about still? And it's okay to be skeptical because we like each other here. We can be friends. Go on then. Okay. We can share a little bit later on, maybe some of the stories there. So it's a good subject to get our heads around. So I want to just hit on to, there's reason important for us to understand it, because they're sort of setting the scene a little bit, and quite a lot of information there about us looking at why we need to understand it. So I want to hit through angels so that we can give Pastor Ravine loads of time on demons. Okay, so there's some things. I'm just going to quickly recap. I did do a sermon before Christmas on angels, so I don't want to recap a lot of this stuff. But I want to go through just who angels are and talking about it. So I had a fight with ChatGPT. And I said to Chat, those that know ChatGPT, it's AI technology. And I said to ChatGPT, ChatGPT, please could you draw me a picture of an angel? And ChatGPT drew me this picture here of an angel with wings on. And I turned around and I said to ChatGPT, ChatGPT, I told you to draw me a biblical picture of an angel. Where does it say in the Bible that angels have wings? And Chat said, I'm really sorry, you are right. And it drew me, so I said, could you draw me a picture of what it thinks an angel looks like? So according to AI technology, that is an angel. Looks quite like Jesus, actually, doesn't it? You have a particular face of him. But as Michelle pointed out in our meeting, that looks more like, she likes the sword in the angel's hands. Okay, so we just want to look at now, just fly through, just looking at what angels are. So, just very quickly, I'll unpack this a bit more. What angels are not. Number one, angels are not dead people. Please do not say, I do not think it's helpful when we say to people, they've become an angel in heaven now. Okay, they're not an angel in heaven if someone's died. Angels and humans are different. Okay, just want to clarify that. The next thing is, they are not human. Okay, there's some debates. We're not going to have a chance to explore the Nephilim over here. There's some debates when we go through stuff about fallen angels, sons of every different thing. Angels are not humans, okay? All the way through the Bible, there is a distinction between them. Angels are not winged creatures. We will explore that in a minute in a bit more depth than I did before. Okay, so sorry if you want to wear angel wings at Christmas, okay? We should be having big, strong men going around with swords, not little fat toddlers. Okay. There are cherubim and seraphim, but we're going to mention them because they have a distinct role, and we're going to look at them in a moment. So I'll go back here. Angels are not perfect. Some of you, when you describe your child as a little angel, are you talking about the fallen angel? Okay, are you talking about the sword-wielding angel? Are you talking about the messenger angel? Guys, this idea of angels being these perfect creatures, it's not true. Because if the demons and Satan is a fallen angel, angels can get things wrong and do things that are wrong. And here we go. The last one is angel. Everyone gets a guardian angel that's allocated to a person. I'm really sorry. That note that you had from that bookshop that cost you £20 with the description of your guardian angel was so that someone can make 20 quid out of you. Okay. Your guardian angel is not around you. Now, there are angels that protect you. Jesus refers to that in Matthew. Me and Pastor, we have a chat yesterday about it. I think it's Matthew 18, I think it is, verse 10. And it talks about angels there. And it talks about angels in Psalm 91. But it talks about sending angels to protect you. You don't have a little angel on your shoulder protecting you. It would be nice if we had that go on, okay? But unfortunately, it doesn't quite happen. So that's just a quick summary of what angels are not. I'm sorry if I've damaged your illusion again of what angels are. But let's look at what angels are. Angels are created beings. So Nehemiah, verse 9, verse 6 says, you alone are the Lord. You made the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all their starry hosts, the earth and all that is in it, on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heavens worship you. This is important. Angels are created beings, not eternal beings. What do I mean? God has always been, from the beginning to the end. The angels were created. Okay. They were created. And the question, I was going to ask this question, but I'm not going to ask it today. We'll look at it more, pack it a bit more now. When were angels created? Now, it's a good question to think about, because for some reason in my head, I had assumed that angels had almost existed forever. That God's surrounded by angels in his heavenly thrones in the heavens. But if you look at Genesis chapter 1, what does it say? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Angels are not eternal beings. They were created. The implication of this verse is huge. Before the creation story, there was no heavens or no earth. There was just God. So they are created. They're part of God's creation story. Now remember, God is omnipresent, which means he's everywhere at once. So he didn't need a heaven and earth before creation came. He only created the heaven and earth afterwards. And it's hard to get our heads around. So looking at this, angels would have been created during the time of creation. Now, which day they were created, we're not 100% sure. There's different ideas of when they were created, but they were created after God created the heavens and the earth. Really, really important, okay, that they did. And we're going to explore that a bit more next week, because that's going to have real significance for looking at demons. Does that make sense? So angels were created when God created everything. That's when God created angels. So therefore, we should not worship angels because they are created. And there's big implications on that creation for us next week when we start to look more at the demonic. The next thing is this. Angels have ranks and roles. Angels are not all little cute fluffy things, as I talk about different pictures. I always think about this. The pictures that we have on angels, if anyone knows kids in school, they have the test to see if they're fat or not. Okay, they get weighed. And the pictures that we see of angels, I'm pretty sure most of the angels would fail the obese test. Okay, for the way the Italians drew them and the impression that we have. But this is not true. And I showed you that picture of the chat with it. But the Bible refers to God's army of angels. And armies have ranks and roles where everyone has a different job. So meet Michael. It talks about this in Jude verse 9. It says, but even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to condemn himself for slander, but said, the Lord rebuke you. The Bible's, as I said earlier, from those verses you're like, it's a bit weird, isn't it? It's a bit strange to get my head around it. We see Michael appear. He's referred to as an archangel. If you go back to the book of Daniel, the passage you read earlier, Daniel chapter 10, verse 13. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. He's referred there to as a chief prince, but it's the same Michael. We can see this flowing through. Revelation, again, a passage I mentioned earlier. Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 to 9. Then war broke out in heavens, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. You see again, Michael standing there, strong, is a warrior angel leading the charge against demonic forces. And 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 11, it says this, yet even angels, although they are stronger and more powerful, do not heap abuse on such beings when bringing judgment on them from the Lord. And I think we need to hold this idea in our head that angels are powerful. Especially warrior angels. We use that word warrior angel. It's not actually in the Bible, but they are warrior angels, if you read, going on and fighting for us. And, it changes the way we think. I live with 3 females in my house, and often people turn around and they say to me, oh my goodness, how are your angels doing at home? And I keep thinking to them, if you know my wife, I could probably just describe her better than I think the way they're describing her. And actually, they're quite ferocious, protecting, strong creatures that we need to be aware of. And I love this description of Michael here. He's not someone to be messed with. He has the title of archangel or chief prince. He definitely wasn't an overweight toddler, but a strong angel. Then the next one we have is this. Okay, back a bit. Okay, is Angel Gabriel. And when I was younger, I always thought Gabriel was a girl. Did anyone else used to think Gabriel was a girl? Put your hands up, admit it. A few of you did. A few of you are liars in this building. You're in a church, okay. But I remember seeing a guy, and the first person I met was called Gabriel, had long hair. I was convinced it was a girl, okay. In today's world, we could be confused, but back then it was a bit more straightforward. And I realized this Gabriel's a boy. That's a girl's name. But then if you look at the Bible, Gabriel was a boy's name. Look at the verse here. It says in Daniel chapter 8, Daniel refers to angels quite a lot, as you probably picked up. Verse 15, 16, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man, and I heard a voice calling from, I can't pronounce that, and there we go, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of this image. And the idea here is I saw a man standing before me. And next, we're going on a bit further. While I was still in prayer, Gabriel, the man I'd seen in the earlier vision, came to me in a swift fight about the time of the evening sacrifice. Notice there, Gabriel was the man who was seen in the earlier vision. Here we go. We got Gabriel appearing again in the New Testament. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth in the village of Galilee to the Virgin Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of the King David. Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." And we have angel Gabriel here, a messenger angel. And this is his role. He's not pictured with a sword in his hand, but he's pictured passing on messages to there. How many other times did Gabriel appear in the Christmas story? Does anyone know other times he appeared? He didn't appear to Joseph. It just says an angel appeared to Joseph. It could have been him. We're not 100% sure. Zechariah, did he appear? Yep, that's the only other time. I think it's that one, isn't it? Zechariah. But in the Matthew, he never refers to Gabriel's name. It's just Luke who refers to Gabriel. Just an interesting fact there. Ask someone at Christmas. Okay. With Gabriel, I sometimes wonder, though, has there been times, as I shared earlier, when an angel's passed a message on to us and we've not quite realized it? You know, David, we've just been taken to hospital. He shared a story with me about Boundary Street, about this guy who appeared, shared something, and then disappeared, and he was on the door, and he can't work out how this guy got out the building. And he said, have we had angels in the building and we just don't know about it? And I wonder how many times those angels have spoken to you. And we've seen this about angels sharing messages throughout the Bible. If you got Genesis chapter 16, verses 10 to 12, we have Hagar. And the story of Hagar is she was a servant who was Abraham's wife's servant. Abraham's wife goes and passes her on to Abraham and says, you sleep with her, we'll have a baby through you. And basically Sarah then gets jealous when Hagar gets pregnant. Imagine that you're a young servant girl, you're pregnant, you're not married. Thousands of years ago, effectively been raped because you've been handed over to your master's, it's your mistress's husband. You're not in a great situation. She's out in the desert. And this is what happens. It says this. The angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. For he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. You will live in hostility towards all of his brothers. And I just wonder, how many times, how did she know even that this was an angel talking to her? You ever wondered that? Was that just me? And I'm just thinking, is there times when angels have spoken to us and we're just not aware because they didn't have wings? Just a thought for you, just a little thought. I won't make a joke about one of the constipated men in the Bible, but there was a constipated man in the Bible called Balaam. Okay, and I'll tell you the joke later when it's not on video. Okay, so, but Balaam, the story of Balaam, he's a crazy prophet who was just about the money. And he goes walking with his ass, his donkey, and his donkey wouldn't move in front of him. And he starts beating the donkey. And then suddenly his eyes appear because the donkey saw there was an angel standing in front of him telling him to stop and not go any further. And then the angel comes and the angel passes on a message to him. And it's another picture of the fact that there's messenger angels there and we don't even realize they're there, standing in front of his donkey. So when at night, when my dog stops wanting to walk in the dark, I'm wondering, is there an angel there? No, let's keep walking. But actually, there's so many accounts throughout the Bible of angels coming in and speaking and encountering. And nowhere in the Bible does it say they're stopping now. So let's hit on to wings. So we have two heavenly beings called the cherubim and the seraphim. Okay. We're not 100% sure they were there at Jesus' birth, even though my favorite Christmas carol, In the Bleak Midwinter, talks about the cherubim and seraphim thronged the air. We don't know if that's true or not, okay? But we'll have that lovely In the Bleak Midwinter, which is theologically accurate, apart from them joking, it's not. But here we go. So who are the cherubim? So the first mention in Genesis, the cherubim, first mentioned in Genesis chapter 3, verse 24, when God placed a cherubim with a flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life after Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden. I'd always thought it was an angel. Did anyone else thought it was an angel? But if you read your Bible, it says there is a cherubim with a flaming sword that was guarding the God in the Garden of Eden, and not an angel. Who was that a new fact for? That was my new fact last week I discovered. And if you read it, it never says angel, or not on the accurate translations. And these are often described throughout in the Bible as powerful angelic beings, but not actually angels. They're associated with guarding the holy place and carrying God's throne. And you can see this, if you want to read more about it, look at Ezekiel chapter 10 later. And as I say, a lot of art, Michelangelo was very famous about him having these flying around. They were mighty, awe-inspiring creatures, not little things. Then we have the seraphim. Now the seraphim, quite famously, we have it in Isaiah chapter 6. And the word seraphim means burning ones. They stand above God's throne, each with 6 wings, and they cover their faces with some of them. They cover their feet with 2. So they cover the faces with 2 wings. They cover their feet with 2 wings, and they fly with the other wings. Very different to our impression of an angel. And they continually cry out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, whose earth is full of his glory." And the summary, a simple way of, I've sort of come to the conclusion of this, is cherubims are guardians of God's holiness and glory up in the heavenlies. And that's why they were placed in front of the Garden of Eden. And then seraphims are worshippers proclaiming his holiness. So the implications when you look at this is we're not actually, with the cherubim and seraphim, they're not the angels who float down to earth to help you out. They're all about the heavens and not actually coming down to earth. Has that confused you? If it has, ask Pastor Ravine. He'll unpack it all for you a bit more. Or Alex, even better. Okay. The next thing here, very quickly come in now, is this. Angels can only be in one place at one time. Angels are not omnipresent. Why is this significant? Because Satan is a fallen angel. That means Satan cannot be everywhere at every time. So if you think Satan is personally in your back, I have a horrible story to tell you. Unless you're winning thousands of people for Jesus, there's a good chance Satan isn't personally on your back. It might be one of his little minions, okay? And we talk about Jesus, and they say, but he was on Jesus' back. He was on Jesus' back, but you're not the Son of God. Just in case you didn't know that, okay? You look at the person next to you and say, you're not the Son of God. Okay, this is important, but this is really, really important because actually, next week, this is all very, I know some of this, a lot of information tonight, but this has an impact on the demonic world. So when we understand the angelic world, we then flip it over and we can have a better understanding of the demonic world. And this is really important. They're not everywhere at every time, okay? They're not as powerful as God. They're not God. Okay, angels are huge in number. There are thousands of angels. Just verses here. The chariots of God are tens. The chariots of God are tens of thousands and thousands and thousands. The Lord has come from Sinai to a sanctuary. Hebrews, you've come from Mount Zion to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You've come upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. One more verse here. I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and tens of thousands times 10,000. That's a big number. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. That's a big number, okay? There are thousands of angels. The implications here in our world, there are lots and lots of angels. Okay, angels are here to minister on behalf of God. This is really important, especially when we start to understand evil next week and the introduction of demons. I want to read Hebrews chapter 1, verses 5 to 14. I'd encourage you, if you've got your Bibles, to read this as well. It says this, "For to which of the angels did God ever say, 'You are my son, today I have become your father,' or again, 'I will be his father, and he will be my son'? And again, when he brings his firstborn into the world, he says, 'Let all God's angels worship him.' In speaking of angels, he says, 'He is making his angels spirits and his servants flames of fire.' But about the Son, he says, 'Your throne, O God, will last forever and ever. A scepter of justice will be a scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has set you above your companions by anointing with oil of joy.' He also says, 'In the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will wear out like garments. You will roll them up like a robe. Like a garment, they'll be changed, but you will remain the same, and your years will never end. To which of the angels did God ever say, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool at your feet'? Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?" This is really, really important for this guys to get our heads around this, because often I will say to you, or I don't say to you, I'll say to my children, because I respect you too much. I'll say to my kids, I'll go, "The world does not revolve around you." Who's ever found you saying that to someone, especially your kids, isn't it? World does not revolve around you. But I want to suggest something here today, that actually, when we read the Bible, that God created the world to revolve around us, for us to have a relationship with him and to be in communion with him. He created the universe, the world that we live in, the animals, the plants, even the angels, for us to enjoy and to build creation with him. So in a way, actually, the world does revolve around us, but the world revolves, but we revolve around God. And it's this relationship thing that's really important. Scientists say that the way that our pull of our universe goes, if it's any different, the universe was any smaller, we wouldn't be able to exist. That sounds like God built the universe around us. We live in one of the only habitable planet. We shouldn't be able to exist. It's mathematically impossible, the chances of what happened to happen on earth by accident. The world revolves around God having a relationship with us. And angels are there to minister to us. You know, I love animals. I especially love my dog. You know, on the way in, I rang my wife because she was just coming back from work as I was going out. And I said to her, "Naomi, I asked my phone this evening, could you ring the most beloved person in my life?" And I said, "My phone responded, 'I haven't got a phone number for your dog, but will your wife do?'" Okay. And she went, "Very funny." And that was a story, if you know our family, that is normal. Okay, I love my dog, and I wish my dog was in heaven. I remember planning my retirement once, thinking about retirement, and I realized that Star wasn't going to be on the beach with me. And a tear came down my eyes. I wanted my old dog, Harvey. My wife will be all right in heaven, but not my dog. Okay, it's a bit sad. But the reality is, the dog adds so much to my life, but the dog is still a dog. And if there was a fire in the house, I would get my kids out before I get the dog out. Why? Because my dog is a created being who's there for our enjoyment in the world. And in the same way, angels are created beings. They have been placed here to assist us, to minister to us. They are not more important than us. This has a big impact next week when we start to look at why Satan came around and why the demons are here. The create universe literally focuses in on God's relationship with us. And it says, just in the last verse there, the Hebrews 14, it says, are not angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Who are the ones who inherit salvation? Human beings who choose Jesus Christ. So I just want to finish off here, okay, just to say this. We need to be aware, number one, that we're in a spiritual battle. Very important. We need to be aware that they're around. And we also need to be aware that there are angels around. And so it's very easy to dismiss. I remember one case, one lady came up to one woman pastor and she was like, we had like an angelic appearance in our service. That it was like angels appeared in the worship. And I was like, woman pastors. I shouldn't think that, but that's what I thought for that moment. I thought, she's all touchy-feely. There we go. Here it goes. Oh, angels appearing. What next? 3 weeks later, we had this worship service, and I can't describe what was going on in the worship service. And someone in my leadership team comes up to me and says, as we were worshiping, I saw someone on that balcony. And she said, I know that was an angel. And I was like, oh, don't tell me that, because it's just, oh, no. And I knew that day something powerful had happened in that building. There was something significant. So we need to be aware of the angels, but we need to have a healthy biblical view, not some weird cultural interpretation. And my prayer is simply this, that God's heavenly angels will minister to you, that you will know God's heavenly angels, that you don't have to know them by name, but you would feel their protection and that you'll be aware of them. But we don't go chasing after them. It's God who sends them to us to minister to us. But it's kind of reassuring to know that God has got angels around us that we're not even aware of, that are there looking out for us and caring for us. Isn't that good to know that? And so that's great. You haven't got a personal angel. There's tens of thousands of angels that are ministering. But we also got to be very aware now that we're not deceived by fallen angels, and we're not deceived by other angels as well. And we need to be aware of that. So next week, we're going to unpack a little bit more. Where did evil come into the world? At what point? It's an interesting thought just to have to yourself. At what point did Satan fall from heaven? Because we've now learned, didn't we, that angels were created at the beginning of creation. So before God created the world, did Satan exist? It's a question for you for next week. Okay. God bless, guys. Thank you very much.